Welcome to Aware. We are dedicated to communicating information that inspires your positive growth and change. Are you interested in a peaceful planet? Are you interested in optimal health? Are you living with purpose? Are you enjoying your life? We realize each person can make a difference, and our mission is to empower your awareness. The choices that you make in every moment shape your life, and we encourage you to realize that you have your own answers and to always listen to your own truth. We invite you to stay aware.
Hello and welcome to the Aware Show. I am Lisa Garr, and when I say it's a true joy to be here today, I mean it so much. This show literally saves me every day. Because our life is constantly changing. Our environment, our world is in a constant state of flux, uncertainty. Even though things are starting to get a little bit more certain, it starts to change again. And this is also known, a very important thing that we need to know about today's day and times is about surrendering. It has a whole new meaning today. It can mean something like giving up, surrendering, white flag, letting go, or what my guest today, Kute Blackson, who's an amazing best-selling author, says is it can be a total transformational experience to really grow into something new. I've said many times that I think we cannot look to recreate what we had or what we were in 2019. Our world has changed. We have changed as a result of it. And we need tools. We need techniques to not only get us to present time, but to help us figure out where we are going moving forward. And Kute has for probably 20 years been speaking on the transformational stage, inspiring audiences all over the world. His first talk was when he was 8 years old to 3,000 people, and now he has spoken in over 300 venues. Oh, more than that, probably by now. Welcome, Kute Blackson. So great to see you again.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Always a joy.
Absolutely. I've interviewed you about your other books. You Are the One, which I love. And now you have this very timely book about the very important magic of surrender. Magic. You call it magic. But some might really feel as if it's just giving up. It's throwing in the towel. There's so many terms associated with surrendering. How do you make that distinction between giving up and actually having a transformational experience with surrendering?
To me, surrender is the art of when you really are letting go of control, letting go of trying to force life to be what you think it should be, letting go of negotiating with life, letting go of the idea of the life that you thought you should have, the person you thought you were going to be, the way you thought a relationship was going to be, the way you thought something should be. And in so many ways, we're so busy trying to force and control and manipulate life to be what we think it should be from our own limited idea and limited perspective. And so surrendering is the willingness to let go. Surrendering is the willingness to be open. Surrendering is the willingness to, shall we say, open to allow life to express through us and allow the highest possibility in a given situation to express through us, even though in a moment we may not know what it is. And many times we think we know what it is, but we really don't know what it is. So surrendering, I think, is the willingness to be curious, the willingness to be open, the willingness to be available, the willingness to live with an open heart.
How do you get there from where, how many things have been shut down or closed or not open? I mean, things that are really never going to open again or return again.
You know, that I was talking to someone about that the other day. There's a few stages, I think, in terms of talking about getting there. I don't think surrender is a formula, but I'll just share with you what I told my friend. I think the first stage is even pre-surrender. The first stage is when we are in a kind of denial. Maybe we're just living life. We're in denial. We're unconscious. We don't even know that we're lying. We're not even aware that something needs to shift. So this is a stage of denial. then maybe we start becoming a little bit more conscious. We become a bit more aware. There's a sense of maybe there's more for me to do. There's something more I want to give. Maybe a sense this relationship's not quite right. Something's not quite aligned. And so we feel this inkling inside of us that something has got to shift. And so we start questioning, but we're still in this mode where we are resisting. And the ego starts resisting because we're holding on to the idea of what we created, the idea of who we were. We're still holding on to the structure of the old. And so the resistance comes into play from a place of self-preservation, so to speak. And so the resistance. And when we're resisting, we tend to block the flow. Then I found we move from resistance to, we'll call it negotiation, where we start negotiating with life. And we're still resisting, but we're negotiating with life. The sense of, well, maybe I don't have to let go of this. Maybe I can make that happen. Maybe, they do have potential. And even though we know things on the line, we start negotiating as a way to not change because we're comfortable, because we're afraid. We're afraid of the consequences. So I think in the stage of resistance and negotiation, it's so important to really move into surrender that we start being really honest with ourselves, because one of the ways that I talk about we keep ourselves stuck are ways we lie to ourselves, ways we don't tell ourselves the truth, which just reinforces our stuckness, reinforces our holding on to the old. Then we move into a phase of, I would say, acceptance. We start realizing that no matter how we rationalize and negotiate with life, nothing is changing. We're not changing. The situation is not changing. Our health isn't changing. The other person's not going to change. So we start to hopefully move into acceptance, the sense of it is what it is, accepting reality as it is. This is, I would say, the first step to change, the first step to creating a shift, the first step to surrender. The thing is, you can be in acceptance, but acceptance does not necessarily mean surrender. For instance, it might be raining outside, and you might say, well, okay, it's raining outside. Why the hell does it have to be raining outside? And what's wrong with the universe? What's wrong with God? It always rains when I want to go outside and play. And so you accept that it's raining outside. You take an umbrella outside, but you're still a little pissed off, a little mad, a little angry that it's raining outside. So still inside of you, you can have this internal relationship of the experience that I'm having is not the experience that I should be having. I should be having some other experience than the experience that I'm having right now. So even though you're in acceptance, you can be a little begrudging with the situation. Surrender really is when you move into a zone of, we'll say, open-hearted participation with the process of life that is happening, with the experience of the moment that is happening. The key is an open-hearted participation. Two things that help that I found is firstly the belief that no matter what happens, the universe is always working for my highest good. That means when things fall apart, when things don't work out, when the relationship ends, when things break down, if we really kind of hold the belief and understand the evolutionary nature of the universe, if the universe is always working for my highest good, then I think it allows us to rest into a space of trust that, okay, if this situation, if this relationship isn't working out the way I wanted, there must be something better. There must be something more than I can even imagine, even though I'm not clear what it is. So really holding the belief and the understanding, the universe is always working for my highest good, even though it's not clear in this moment. Secondly, as souls, we incarnate into this human experience. If we understand that the purpose of life is to grow, learn, and evolve, then from that place, we start focusing on using, even if the situation is difficult, a relationship is difficult or challenging, we start focusing on using every experience to learn the lessons, to grow as an evolutionary opportunity. So we can surrender to rolling our sleeves up and learning the lessons to grow and evolve. So even though we didn't win or achieve by, let's say, material standards, I think when we learn and grow and evolve, no matter what happens on the outside, we always win. And so surrendering to the evolution, surrendering to the growth, surrendering to the lesson. Between acceptance and surrender, most people miss this phase, the phase in the middle, which I call grieving. Grieving is a really important phase that a lot of times we skip over in an effort to, for a few reasons, in an effort to jump into surrender. But without grieving, there is no open-hearted surrender. Surrender, in a sense, is a death of who you thought you were. Surrender is a death. It's a death of who you thought you were, death of the life you thought, death of a relationship, the death of a perceived idea. In 2020, many of us, we had all of these incredible dreams and goals and desires that didn't come into fruition because of the pandemic and COVID and what have you. So something died. And I think it's so important to be able to move into the new, to move into a flow of surrender. We have to surrender to our humanity and honor the grieving. When we honor the grieving, we release the old. When we release the old, then we can really step into the new. We sometimes don't allow ourselves to grieve because we don't think it's spiritual, or we think it will last forever. Or, for some of the spiritual folks like myself, we've done a thing of a spiritual bypass where it's like, well, I want to be in a high vibe, Lisa. I want to stay high vibe. So grieving is not high vibe. The thing is, if we don't allow ourselves to feel the grief, we just carry that energy with us and recreate situations over and over again. So,
well, some of the grief can come from perceived failure, where it feels like, so maybe if somebody's business failed, or if they got in an accident or something like that, those types of things tend to the crisis happens before the surrender. I would say that the crisis happens between, and then the grief comes, and then the surrender comes, and then the acceptance comes. But sometimes we have to get to that crisis point before we even understand that surrender is within a possibility. And I think it's probably your advice to not do the crisis thing, to avoid the accident, to avoid the death, maybe. I mean,
I think in many ways, crisis is a part of life. Challenge is a part of life. Death is a part of life. I think if we're willing to surrender to the process of life and living and realize that life isn't perfect, life is up and down, yin and yang, black and white. There is no perfection out here. There will be life, there will be death, and without death, there is no life. I think when we can surrender to the nature of life, then that frees us up to stop resisting challenge and difficulty and situations as they arise. And so now I think when we hit a moment of crisis or extreme challenges, I think many times we come to a moment where we have outgrown our current structure, we've outgrown our life, but sometimes we don't make that evolutionary jump. We don't make certain decisions to let go, to move forward, and sometimes we hold on. I think crisis can be the universe's way of helping us evolve, the universe's way of helping us graduate, the universe's way of forcing us to evolve, to grow, to jump to that next level, to move us into the next phase of life. But it can sometimes be difficult. So I think it's important that I think if we want to avoid extreme crisis, it's always great to be in a constant process and participation with our own evolution, intentionally looking to see, okay, what is no longer aligned in my life? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to release, so that we don't have to wait till everything stagnates inside of us, or we've outgrown, but we're constantly in a process of continual growth and letting go and evolving and expansion. And so to me, that is being in a personal, a continual sort of process of personal growth.
It's good to recognize that and to let the steam out of the pressure cooker slowly, so that you don't have that crisis point and you realize letting go. If you could look down the road at surrender, it makes the steps along the way easier. I can imagine, I'm not sure because I usually do the crisis thing, but I'm wondering, how has this shown up in your life? Have you learned to do surrender before crisis?
Yeah, have I learned to do surrender before crisis? I would say not perfectly, but I would definitely say, my intense commitment is to my soul's growth and evolution. And I view real success not in terms of what I attain or achieve. I view real success in terms of the level of my growth, the level of my evolution. So I tend to really be intentional in seeking out my opportunities for growth, seeking out the places that are uncomfortable, seeking out what is not aligned and letting go. And because I'm in that continual process, I would say crisis arises less. Look, when you write a book about surrender,
Yeah.
be aware, like literally in a year, and surrender, the Magic of Surender was written before the pandemic, but within a year, I left Los Angeles after 20 some years,
Right.
place I loved and never thought I would ever leave. I moved to Phoenix where I had a house but knew nobody. What else? I left my office in LA, let that go. I broke up with a woman who I thought I was going to marry, have kids with, deeply in love with. That broke up, and I realized that was not aligned. I ended up selling my house in Phoenix, which I told you about, totally unexpectedly. Because I was guided to, that was my deepest truth. I sold my house in Phoenix, moved to Miami, because that's where I felt my soul guiding me. And part of surrender, sometimes what our soul will guide us to do won't always be convenient. But I think part of surrender is the willingness to surrender to our deepest truth. And I feel if we truly get still and listen beyond the mind and surrender to our deepest truth and go in the direction of where our soul is guiding us, move in that direction consistently, we will be growing and evolving. And so I would say I've never felt that I've been growing and evolving more than this moment, even though I don't have a plan, even though I don't have it all figured out. In a sense, I don't have a 17-step plan. I am doing my best to follow the in an uncompromising way the guidance of my spirit, the guidance of my soul. And I think when we do that, we're growing and evolving. And I think so long as we're growing and evolving, that's the key.
A lot of people have done the LA exit here. I mean, a lot of people in Los Angeles who were in the entertainment industry recognized that it was going to be shut down for a while, and they up and moved their families to Iowa and Idaho and other states where the COVID restrictions were not as severe because it's not such a big city. You know, they didn't move to places they could raise their kids. And I appreciate that you and they have become, that they're so fluid and that you are as fluid to be able to do something like that. I want to know what voice, like, how do you know what the universe, like, how did it come to you? What is your soul telling? What was it?
I think for me, we have this idea that soul guidance is going to come with a loud siren bell, loud speakers.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, that would be lovely. We would just, but many of us still wouldn't follow it, even when it comes that way. You're like, turn left. No.
Nope.
Nope. And we go right. I think many times the soul guidance comes in a quiet whisper. It comes in a gentle sensation in the body. If we really start paying attention to our body sensations, to beyond the mind, I found that it's really about learning to follow the energy. What I've really sought to do in my life is follow the energy, follow the sensation, follow the energy. And that's really what I've been doing. I think life has an energy. Life has a flow. It has its own wave. And our job is to really start cultivating a sensitivity to attune to that wave. So for me, for instance, make it more practical, back in December, I just heard a nudge. It was honestly a nudge that said, yeah, go check out Miami for a few days. There's no plan to move there, no idea why. One of the things that I have had to give up, that I invite everyone to explore letting go of, is the constant need to know. The mind has a constant need to know what something is, to know what something means, and we block ourselves and block our guidance and block our acting on the guidance with the sense of we're guided to turn left, and then we start saying, well, why? And what does this mean? And where's this going?
I don't know anything about left.
And I don't know anything about
unfamiliar.
It's unfamiliar. And then we stop. So I actually invite people, don't question. When you feel that impulse arising that is beyond your logic, beyond your mind, beyond what makes sense, listen to it. You don't have to have it all figured out in order to get to exactly where you need to be, but just take a step in that direction. I heard a guidance that said, go to Miami. No idea why. I showed up there for 4 days. was like, wow, this place is amazing. This place
Wait,
is
you
very
followed the
interesting.
guidance enough to make a plane reservation and go.
I followed the guidance without any clue, any idea, something. So what I stopped doing a while back is I stopped questioning this guidance, because this guidance wasn't coming from my mind. It wasn't coming from logic. We're so often living life from our mind, but the challenge is when we are manifesting and creating life from our mind, we end up, to a degree, I feel, living a limited life, because the mind can only conceive and visualize and envision and project based on the past experiences of what it's known. But our soul is infinite. Our soul, when we surrender to our soul is not limited to the past. Our soul is not limited to our pain. Our soul is not limited to our childhood. Our soul is not limited to our parents and our generations. Our soul is infinite. So when we surrender, we open to the infinite possibilities of life, and that's when life can express through us. So I heard this guidance, go to Miami, and I didn't question. That's the key. I just didn't question. I didn't
Wow.
need to know why. Give up the need to know why and just take a step. In each step, life shows you and reveals to you what's next. So I took a step. Once I was there for 4 days, another nudging said, come back for 1 month. That's it. Come back for 1 month, hang out here. Hang out for 1 month. Had no idea where I was going to move. I came back, stayed about 10 days into my 1 month experiment. After 10 days, I saw a loft, an apartment. When I walked in, I knew this is where I needed to be. It was a knowing that occurred in the moment. It was a knowing that arose in the process of action. We sometimes think surrender means what, just sit there on the couch, do nothing. I was in action. I showed up. I was giving 100%. I was participating with life. It wasn't like I was sitting there. And so in the process of living, life met me, life revealed to me, life showed me. And that's when I heard the guidance, sell your house in Phoenix. It was clear as day. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay where I was. It wasn't what I wanted to do. So I knew it was coming from a deeper intelligence. And I found in my life that whenever I have not trusted that deeper intelligence
Yeah.
beyond logic, it never ends up well. And so I was just following that. And so I think it's also learning to become comfortable with the unknown and
Well,
trusting.
I mean, my inner voice is saying, well, what if you have kids and they're in school and you have a job and all of that? And of course, that's going to be the situation. You're going to have that. What if it's not as easy to get up and go? What if you're not as fluid?
I think there's always reasons. I could have made reasons, I could have made excuses. I think there's always reasons, Lisa. The mind will find all sorts of, if it's not the kids, it's the grandkids. If it's not the grandkids, it's the pet chihuahua. If it's not the pet chihuahua, it's the pet alligator. If it's not that, there's always going to be something. I can only speak from my experience, the experience of my clients, that I really feel if you are guided from your soul beyond yourself, if you are guided, and this guidance is not a mental projection, but it is a deep impulse of the intelligence of life. I trust this intelligence of life that encoded in this guidance, encoded in the vision, is also the intelligent seed for its fulfillment. That life knows how to bring about the perfect orchestration of the fulfillment of what's needed. The fulfillment of what's needed will happen if we're following the flow. And so if we're truly guided, not something we think we should do, but if we're truly guided, I believe in if you have kids, if you have business, if you have work, if you have what have you, if you're truly guided, you're in the flow. And if you're in the flow, everything unfolds in ways that you cannot plan, in ways that you couldn't imagine, in ways that you could never have sort of figured out with your mind. But I think we have to first and foremost be willing to truly trust that inner guidance in a profound way, because I think it has an intelligence, it has a power, And yes, I acknowledge that kids, life, work, these are all considerations. But I think when we don't follow that true guidance, if it's authentic, then we block life, then things will stagnate. And what I found will tend to happen is we get out of the flow, we'll stay where we are because it's convenient, and things won't really flow. I'm sure that for, let's say, Nelson Mandela, it probably wasn't convenient for him to stay in prison for 27 years.
Right.
It probably wasn't convenient. So what if he, and I don't wish we go to jail, I don't wish he went to jail, but he was following his soul's guidance. That was his soul's path. And what if he didn't? The world would be a different place. I'm sure it wasn't very convenient for Martin Luther King to do what he did, to lead the civil rights movement, and he resisted it for a while. But I think there came a point where he had to surrender to the deeper reality that there was a bigger impulse of life that was living him and moving through him and expressing through him. And he got to the point where he had to surrender to life itself. And that's really what I'm inviting. I'm not predicting where it will take you. Only your soul knows. I'm not predicting and saying that you're going to win the lottery or things are going to work out exactly how you might expect. But what I am saying is, if you follow that guidance, you will be in flow. You will be exactly where you need to be for what your soul and everyone concerned in your family and your life, for what all concerned really need. Because I'm sure it wasn't convenient for Martin Luther King.
No, those are
to
great
follow his path.
examples, actually, because they even had death threats and they threatened,
Yes.
their families were threatened. I mean, it went way beyond. I mean, it was a calling for sure, but it was dangerous. And
Yeah.
they kept pursuing and surrendering to whatever may happen. And because they had that deep of a calling, and it was
yes.
against everything. Mhm.
It was authentic for them. Yeah.
Yes. So, in your experiences where you've lived all over the world and you've traveled a lot and you've listened to this art of surrender, have you had an experience with your mother at the beginning of your
Yeah.
book? Could you explain that? What did you learn with that?
Yeah, that was part of the inspiration of the book as well. And what I will say is the Magic of Surrender, just to be, transparent, it was not the book I thought I was going to write.
Oh,
I had my own agenda and my own ideas of the book I thought I was going to write. And I remember one day I wrote on a wall, on a whiteboard, a big wall, huge wall, whiteboard, all sorts of ideas and thoughts and titles of books I thought would sell, books I thought people would love, books I thought people would buy, books I thought had an angle, books I thought would be a #1 New York Times bestseller. I had all these phenomenal ideas, Lisa. And there was one day when I was sitting there and I literally felt the soul of this topic, the soul of this book land, and it became clear as day. The book is about surrender. It's not about any of these things that are sexy to your mind. It is about surrender. And I had to surrender to the soul of what the book was, and that was a process for me. And the entire process really began because in 2016, at the end of the year, my mother was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And that was totally unexpected. I was riding high. My You Are the One book was a New York Times bestseller. And I was on top of the world and, traveling and speaking. And it was intense. For an entire year, I was flying back and forth from LA to London to be with my mother during chemo sessions and just sit with her and talk with her. And it was a challenging year, an emotional year, a difficult year, an intense year. And I wasn't so surrendered because I was hell-bent on making sure my mother didn't die, that I was going to keep her alive, that I was going to find a cure, that I was going to find a solution, that we were going to create a miracle. And the miracle was that she was going to live for another 25 years. And this was my agenda, I'm going to be honest, in the beginning. And I was driving hard to make that happen. And it was a process of realizing that I'm not in control. It was a process of realizing that no matter what I do, my mother has her own soul's destiny. And no matter what I think her destiny should be or what I would like, She has her own soul's journey in this lifetime that I have to honor and respect and allow. And so it became very clear one day that my mother was not going to live. And, this is the woman I love the most, the person I love the most. And it was really hard. The doctor said to her, this is when the surrender theme came into being. The doctor said to her, get your affairs in order because we don't know how long. It could be days, weeks, or months. I looked at my mother in the car on the way home and I said to her, are you afraid? And she said, I'm not afraid because I know I'm not just this body. I know that I'm a soul. I'm an eternal spirit. And I thought that was quite deep, being that she was in the moment of facing death. And bear in mind, my mother was always a very emotional human being. And I never saw her cry during this year. I never saw her complain. I never saw her, let's say, feel like a victim, which honestly surprised me because she was always crying, full of emotion. And I asked my mother during this moment when I realized, this is it. Like it could be the last conversations I have. I said to her, what can I do for you to make your life easier? What can I take you? What can I buy you? What can I do for you? And she looked at me and she said, this was the essence of it, of surrender for me. She said, there's nothing that I need you to do for me, son. I said, so what do you want? She said, all I really want for my life and for myself in this moment is what God wants for me. That's it. And it really hit me. She was totally surrendered to whatever her highest destiny. She wasn't surrendered to dying. She wasn't surrendered to living. She was just surrendered to whatever the highest was for her soul and her soul's evolution. And I saw that that was the key to her peace. And when she passed away, I really reflected on her life, how this Japanese woman married an African guy, never met him, agreed to marry him, couldn't speak the same language, moved to Africa, had an mixed African kid. And I mean, her life was about surrender. And that's how it all came about. And I looked at her and I realized my mother was a great woman, not because she was famous or had all of these, Instagram followers or following. Her greatness was in her surrender to life, in her surrender to the uncompromising willingness to follow her guidance, follow her soul. And that was her greatness. I looked at the great ones, some of which we talked about in reflecting the reflections for this book. Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad Ali, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Greta Thunberg, Malaya, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Oprah. I mean, the list goes on. On some level, they all had to come to a moment, come to a point in their lives where they had to let go and they had to surrender themselves to something bigger than themselves, to life itself, to being, I guess, surrender to being lived by life itself. And because they surrendered to being lived, well, they realized, look, my life isn't my life. So universe, use me. I'm available. I'm open. I think that's when we are able to go beyond our own limited ego, go beyond our own personal power. And truly, that's when life, what I found, that's when life begins to use us in ways we cannot imagine. That's when life begins to move through us, create through us, express through us. And powerful things happen that we can't even plan. And that's, for me, the invitation and what I'm excited about because I've seen it in my life.
It's the ultimate detachment. It's the ultimate sense of being unattached to outcomes, to agendas, to ego, to life. I mean, there's the beautiful, Buddhist art of not being attached to things. And it's sometimes, though, it takes a higher training to do something like to be in that art of detachment. But you're saying we can all do it. You don't have to necessarily be a Buddhist to detach.
Yeah, look, what I'm saying is show up, give 100%, give your best, but don't get too attached to the outcome. Because sometimes we think that goal is the goal, and we think that's what we want. But sometimes that goal is just a necessary, or the pursuit of the goal is really just a necessary puzzle piece in our soul's growth evolution that we need to learn something along the way. And so when we're not so, shall we say, attached to what we think something is, to knowing, like I know, and we just allow ourselves to stay open and really embrace, like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this means. I don't know what this relationship is. Then that doesn't mean you don't give 100%. It just means you live with an openness, but you also live with, let's say, the quality of curiosity. So living with curiosity of like, I don't know what this is, but I'm available. I'm still going to show up. I'm still going to try. I'm still going to give everything I've got, but I'm not going to pretend to know what this relationship is or isn't. I'm going to be available because many times I feel we end up limiting life because we get attached and we know what something is, and we don't. There's been so many moments, Lisa, when in my life, looking back, I thought I knew exactly what something was, and it turned out to be exactly the opposite. You know,
Right.
and so when we're open like that with the curiosity, I believe that's when we are available to life. And I'm just inviting people to be available to life, because often the mechanism that we use to determine meaning for something is the mind, which is programmed and based on our past conditioning and history and what have you. And so
Yeah,
availability and openness.
I invite anyone listening to really ask yourself this question. What have you surrendered to in the past that has turned out better than you could have ever planned or expected?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I
Better.
mean, really ask yourself that question. I mean, when you think about it, there's so many things that I can think of that I have surrendered to. And look, I'm a planner. I am a planner. Ask my husband. I will plan things at 10 o'clock at night.
Let me ask you a question, Lisa. Did you plan exactly the time? I mean, this might backfire on me, but did you plan exactly the time, the date, and the place where you were going to meet your husband?
Oh no.
It just kind of. I don't even know. I think you told me, but it just kind of happened.
Oh yeah.
It just happened. So the best things in life tend to happen when we are just living life, when we're not even expecting it. Like,
Oh my
one
gosh.
of the best things in your life, your husband, which led to your beautiful kid. You didn't
Yes.
plan that. It just happened. That doesn't mean you sat at home and did nothing. But if we look at our lives, so many of the most amazing things in my life, I could never have planned.
I know. And I mean, look, we didn't plan the exact date and time where our daughter happened, and she is one of our greatest gifts.
Mm.
Now, I will tell you that she's just been in an accident, and it was
Mm.
it was really, really, really brutal for her. And to surrender to all that she's had
Mm.
to surrender to, she ran into a parked truck on a bicycle going 25 miles an hour.
Oh.
And I will tell you, she is so incredibly blessed and fortunate that she still has limbs and fingers.
Mm.
And all that she has learned, and this has been an absolute incredible lesson. And I know you work with a lot of young people. Our daughter's 18. What she was struggling with before this was
Mm.
really that, and a lot of teenagers are dealing with this right now with the pandemic and being shut in and not being able to see a lot of friends, and like, what is my future? Everything's so uncertain. I haven't seen friends. Where are they? And they're starting to see them again, and they're like, are these really my friends? She had all of this mixed stuff going on in her. And this one thing has shown her what a miracle life can be.
Yeah.
And all these plans that she had to go, do this and do that, she's just sitting now. And thank God she's sitting with fingers still,
Mhm.
and with limbs, and those could have all been gone. And it's just taught her that, especially with our young people, so much has been taken away and changed for them. A lot of future, a lot of stuff.
Mm.
And this is a time to really, really surrender. I don't encourage you doing the accident thing at all.
Yeah, let's
You know?
not hope for that one. That's a tough one, you
Yeah.
know. But life is a
So,
process of evolution. I really believe that ultimately, if we really remember that we incarnate into this human experience to evolve, and ultimately, on a grander level, the only thing that's going on is our evolution. Yes, you know, life and travel and this and that and work and money, but I think every single experience and relationship and situation is here to serve our soul's evolution, for us to realize who we are, for us to grow, for us to learn, for us to evolve, for us to expand into the most authentic version of ourselves. And I think if we really remember that, then it allows us to surrender a bit more, even if it's challenging, which it is, a bit more to, in the midst of difficult moments and experiences and relationships, to, okay, what is my soul seeking to learn here? Why did I attract this situation? What is the karma? What is the lesson? What is my evolutionary gift in this experience? And I think if we focus on that, it allows us to move through, because to me that's real success, is our growth.
yes, it is. And so in anything what you're facing in life, if it's a career change or if it's a pivot, a lot of people are facing pivots in our, and you used to take people way before the pandemic on these Bali journeys. And you would take people who were in these massive shifts in their life. And those journeys are really, really about surrendering. You've been doing and talking about surrendering for a long time, if you think about it.
Yes,
I,
yes.
I mean, really a perfect uh, time for you to really dive into this topic for all of us. What is it that you saw people do during those times where they really, really committed, and a lot of them had lost everything?
So what is it I saw
Your
people?
Balinese experiences when you took people on those excursions, on those trips, what was it that you saw them do when they really fully surrendered? What did that look like?
I mean, surrender is a letting go. It's a letting go of, I think, realizing that we really aren't in control of
I
this
mean,
whole.
my question wasn't maybe really clear. It's what I'm asking you is give me examples of times where you really saw people surrender when they resisted it the most.
Wow. I mean, there's so many stories. It could be just surrendering to the weather, surrendering to the way things were in India or in Bali. I mean, there's so many things I could say.
Right,
So many things.
right, right. I mean, probably hard to recall a specific, or you can't explain a specific person's
Yeah,
example, but
yeah.
yeah.
But
So
there's a
that
lot. But there's a lot of stories in the You Are the One book, and there's a lot of stories in the Magic of Surrender book as well, in terms of like specific stories and examples. Yeah.
yeah.
But I think ultimately surrender to me is the password to freedom. Surrender is what gives us access to freedom, because in surrender we move out of resistance and we move into flow, and that's what happens when we surrender. It's the key.
It is. So that's an interesting word, is freedom. It's the one thing that we seek. It's the one value that we
Hmm.
want. And I mean, especially even in the US, it's freedom. And there's so many words around freedom, but it is the ultimate goal, isn't it? Freedom. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the detachment from things that hold you back or restrict you.
Mm.
And so that level of surrendering isn't it, doesn't feel like that though. It doesn't feel like you give up things in order to have freedom, but it's truly how it works, right?
I think it's a giving up of, see, surrender really is a state of being. It's not simply a matter of form or things. It's a state of being inside. And so, really, what you're giving up is that which is not really aligned with who you are today. What you're giving up is the old. What you're giving up really is that which doesn't really work. What you're giving up is are things that you've outgrown. Even if you don't think you've outgrown it, what you're giving up is whatever is not a match, a vibrational match, that which is not aligned with who you are. That's what you're giving up.
Mm.
That's what you're letting go of. That's what you're releasing so that you can make space for more. Surrender doesn't mean you're going to be a monk or a nun in the Himalayas. Surrender doesn't mean you can't have a beautiful relationship and kids and drive a beautiful car and live in a beautiful neighborhood. And it doesn't mean you can't, have an abundant life. To me, surrender is a state of being. It's not so much about what you have or what you don't have. It's really your relationship with it. If you are attached to having it, then even if it's possessions or things, then those things have you, then you're not free. And so in many ways, we have, as a culture, defined our self-worth, our value, our identity with what we have, who we are with what we have, who we are with our title, who we are with our bank account, who we are with the car we drive, who we are with, these physical things on a material level. And I think part of why 2020 was also very intense and challenging, but also profoundly growth forcing, was as many of the things we held on to for a sense of identity fell away, it forced us to surrender and let go and question more deeply. Talk about freedom, question more deeply. Well, if I'm not my job, and if I'm not my bank account, and if I'm not my car, and if I'm not my clothes, if I'm not my fill in the blank, then who am I really? Like, who am I really when that stuff is no longer, or when I can't do what I typically do in terms of job or work or what have you, where I get my sense of self from, then who am I really? And I think that's the real freedom of what we're being invited to, even during this time. It's a, I was going to say, even this pandemic can be a spiritual process of surrender, and through the surrender, a freedom as we connect more deeply with our authentic nature, which isn't based on what you have or what you drive or what you wear or any of that stuff inside. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not anti-material, but I think the real freedom to, when you really know who you are on that level, then you're free to have it or not have it. It doesn't define you. And to me, that's freedom. You can have the car, you cannot have the car. You can have the house, you cannot have the house. That's a level of freedom that I think
That's
is
true.
available.
That's true. And also what you just said about being attached to your identity around things. We are looking at having to let go of a lot of things. We're
Yes.
letting go of the way people gather,
Yeah.
letting go of some health freedoms, letting go of a few things that we might not want to let go of, or we could choose to hold on to. That's also a level of surrender. There, you have sometimes to give things up. You just do.
Yeah.
You just do. But when you make that choice from an empowered place,
Yes.
that can lead to really the empowerment of surrender. I know of a lot of people that are looking at, do I do the vaccine, and where are my health freedoms around something like that? And if you can choose to take the vaccine, that's a surrendering. You can choose not to do the vaccine, that's a surrendering. There's a lot here that you're talking about that really has a lot of relevance to letting go in today's changing times. And I think it makes it a lot less, if you don't meet it with so much resistance, could make it a little bit easier.
Yeah. Surrendering to your truth. Yeah, surrender doesn't necessarily mean you don't do anything. Surrender might mean you stand up and protest, right?
Right.
And you take a stand for what you believe is true in your heart, and you go where it's uncomfortable. It might mean that, but you can do so from a place of alignment and clarity from your soul. And so it doesn't necessarily mean you take the vaccine or don't take the vaccine, or do what people want or don't. It means you feel, what is authentic for my soul? What is the deepest alignment for my soul? And what might be right for my soul and my evolution might be different than yours. But when we really surrender to what is my deepest truth, truly, not what I've been conditioned to believe, not what media has programmed, not what my parents have programmed, what is my deepest, authentic truth beyond fear. And when we can surrender to that, we're in alignment, no matter what anyone says. And I think that's the freedom. When you're in alignment, you're free.
I think the biggest question is, Kute, is how to tune into that voice. You have a lot of practice with it, and
Yeah,
you have a lot of validation because when you do tune in, you get a positive experience.
yeah.
But what if us
You
don't know
you
how?
you have to want the truth more than you want what you want.
Mm,
And sometimes we tune in and we do what's needed to tune in, but because we're attached to a certain outcome or we're attached to a certain result, we tune in with a lens or with a sort of predisposition for what we're tuning in for. And so when you really want when you're committed to the truth more than you want what you want, then you can tune in a neutral, biased way so that you can actually receive the deeper information. And so one of the things I would suggest everyone do is really create the space and the time in your daily life to listen. We're so busy in so many ways that we're not really creating the time and the space to listen because
hmm
we're on technology, we're on iPhones, we're running around. And sometimes we're afraid to really listen because we're afraid of if we really tune in, we might hear something we don't want to hear. So if I keep
True.
myself busy, then I don't have to hear that. I might need to leave my job. I might need to write that book that scares me. I might need to, start speaking in public. And so if I don't tune in, so take the time to tune in. First, be open and be committed to the truth. Then create the spaces in your life to be still, and then truly listen without any agenda and just listen. Listen. If we really create the spaces to listen, you will hear the nudging. The nudging won't always come in a loud voice. It might just come in a gentle push, just that says over there. And so if we do that and then don't question, to me, that's the key.
It also is what brings you joy. It's
Yep.
that thing that keeps saying, this, when you dream of it, I keep dreaming of this, or keep thinking I'm happier when I do this, or this makes me feel lighter. Those are the nudgings.
The
Those are the
nudging's true.
nudgings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feeling where your vibration kind of rises, yeah.
Yes.
Which can be scary sometimes.
Oh, right. That's why we don't listen. That's why we ignore those types of things. So the Magic of Surender, it's a beautiful, beautiful book, a beautiful idea to come out with at this time. We really do need this. Is there a short little, when we want to tap in, do you teach just drop in, close your eyes, stop, quiet the room? I mean, how do you do that? Is there something little short thing that you could teach us to do?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, become still, drop in, tap in, tune into your body sensation. Tune into your body because your body often has an intelligence that is not logical beyond your mind. Tune into your body. Feel, how does it feel in your body? Feel, is there any resonance? Is there any energy in your body that moves? And just listen. To me, it's about following the energy of life, following the energy inside. And that's what I would say.
Well, I'm really proud of what you've created with all of your shifting and move. Thanks for being the example of what it means to surrender and to thrive.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm,
It's exciting.
It must be. It's a fun way to live, too. So you can check everything out at kuteblackson.com. Is that the right place to look for the book?
People can go to the www.themagicofsurender.com and get the book there and get a whole bunch of free gifts when they get the book.
Wonderful. And we look forward to seeing each other soon when things do open up for us, but have fun in Miami.
Thank you. Much love.
All right. Much, much love. And I also invite our wonderful listeners at any time, if you want to check out the podcast, you can go to The Aware Show, which is our podcast, and you can share this interview with friends. If you know somebody who really wants to or needs this information around surrendering, this is a really great thing to do, is share this podcast, leave a comment. When you share something and you teach what you've learned, it helps you learn a little easier as well. All right, well, that's it for me today. Thank you so much. And again, until next time, I invite you to stay aware. Let's take a look at this trailer that Kute did for his book, The Magic of Surender.
Surrender isn't giving up. It's tapping into a source that is bigger than your own personal power. We often think letting go means you lose. But what if letting go leads to more? More joy, more power, more peace, more freedom, more love, more miracles. More of who you are, more of who you are meant to be, and more than you could ever have imagined. Surrender is what happens when you take all the conditions off of life and stop trying to control everything. And the everything is more than you could have planned for yourself. There lies the paradox. Letting go leads to more. And if you want the magic, you must surrender. I will show you how.